The mud was a constant, greedy thief, stealing warmth from their bodies and morale from their souls. For the candidates of the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, this was the crucible, a relentless 21-day ordeal designed to grind them down to their absolute core and see what, if anything, remained. The world was a miserable landscape of rain, mud, and the barking, omnipresent voice of Drill Sergeant Thorne. A legend within the 75th Ranger Regiment, Thorne was a man who seemed to be carved from the very same Georgia granite they were forced to haul on their backs. His job was not to teach, but to cull. He was a predator hunting for the slightest sign of weakness, and his eyes had been fixed on recruit Anya Sharma since day one. Sharma was an anomaly. In a field of broad-shouldered, swaggering men and a handful of equally formidable women, she was quiet, slight of frame, and introspective. She met the minimum physical standards, but just barely. On the long, punishing ruck marches, she was always at the back of the formation, her face a pale mask of exertion. In a hand-to-hand combat pits, she was easily overpowered. Thorne and his cadre of instructors had her pegged, another diversity hire, who would wash out before the first week was over. They saw her struggle, and they mistook her quiet endurance for weakness. The grind was relentless, a blur of sleep-deprived days and freezing, rain-soaked nights. The obstacle courses were designed to test raw, explosive power, and Sharma often struggled, her smaller frame a disadvantage on the high walls and rope climbs. Thorne's voice was a constant, corrosive presence at her back. "Come on, Sharma, my grandmother can do it faster than that," he would bellow, his voice dripping with contempt. "Are you going to cry? Is that what you're going to do? Quit now and save us all the paperwork." But she never cried, and she never quit. She would fail an obstacle, take the prescribed punishment of push-ups in the mud, and then get up and try again, her movements economical, her jaw set with a quiet, stubborn determination that Thorne found more infuriating than any outburst would have been. She was a silent, unmovable object resisting the irresistible force of his will to break her. He saw her as a failure, a weak link who was being carried by the stronger members of her team who, out of a misplaced sense of chivalry or pity, would often give her a subtle boost over a wall or pull her up the last few feet of rope. He was certain that once the individual test began, she would be exposed and sent packing. But then came the anomalies, the small, unsettling flashes of a skill that did not fit the profile of a struggling recruit. During the land navigation course, a multi-day exercise that sent candidates out alone into the vast, disorienting wilderness of Fort Benning, Sharma did not just succeed, she excelled. While other, stronger candidates got lost for hours, she moved through the dense forest like a ghost, her routes impossibly efficient, her timing perfect. She returned to the rendezvous point hours ahead of schedule, not even seeming tired, her map marked with a precision that was unnerving. Thorne, reviewing her course plot, was baffled. Her route had taken her through terrain marked as impassable, a treacherous swamp that should have stopped her cold. It was as if she hadn't gone around it, but had simply floated over it. Then came the marksmanship tests. The other recruits fired with the brute force and aggression they had been taught. Sharma was different. She handled her rifle not as a tool, but as an extension of her own body. Her movements were fluid, economical, and possessed a familiarity that was deeply unsettling. Her breathing was controlled, her trigger pull perfect, while others sprayed round around the target. Her groupings were tight, precise clusters of holes dead in the center of the mass. She shot with the detached, chilling proficiency of a master assassin, not a raw recruit. Thorne watched her on the range, a cold knot of cognitive dissonance tightening in his gut. The pieces didn't fit. The struggling physical specimen and the preternaturally gifted navigator and marksman were two different people, and they were both inhabiting the same quiet woman. The final field exercise was a 72-hour nightmare of constant movement, simulated combat, and absolute sleep deprivation. At the end of it, the exhausted, mud-caked candidates were marched back to the barracks, their bodies aching, their minds numb with fatigue. They were allowed a single hour of sleep before being violently awoken by the crash of a metal trash can on the concrete floor. The lights flickered on, revealing Drill Sergeant Thorne and his instructors, their faces grim. "Get up, you disgusting slugs." Thorne roared, the sound of his voice a physical blow. "You think it's over? It's never over. Dump your gear. Everything out of your rucksacks for a full inspection. I want to see every single piece of gear you were issued, and it had better be clean." It was a classic rite of passage, a final test of discipline and mental fortitude under extreme duress. The recruits, moving like zombies, stumbled to their bunks and began the laborious process of emptying their heavy packs onto the floor. It was in this moment of collective misery and exhaustion that Thorne planned to finally break Sharma. He would find a single speck of dirt on her gear, a misplaced item, and he would use it as a pretext to unleash a torrent of psychological warfare that would finally make her quit. Thorne stalked down the line of weary recruits, his eyes scanning the neatly laid out gear like a hawk. He kicked a canteen here, pointed out a smudge of mud there, his voice a low, menacing growl. He finally arrived at Sharma's bunk. She stood at attention, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes clear. Thorne smirked. This was it. He grabbed her rucksack, which she had not yet fully emptied, and with a theatrical, contemptuous gesture, he upended it, spilling the last of its contents onto her poncho liner. Standard issue items clattered onto the floor: a compass, a spare magazine, a small first aid kit, and something else. Something small, dark, and heavy that fell with a soft, metallic thud that was different from the rest. It was tucked inside a small, waterproof pouch, hidden deep in the pack's interior lining. Thorne's eyes narrowed. He bent down and picked it up. It was a medal, but it was unlike any military award he had ever seen in his 25 years of service. It was not a Medal of Honor, not a Silver Star or a Navy Cross. It was crafted from a strange, dark metal that seemed to absorb the light, its surface a non-reflective, matte black. It was shaped like a heavy, five-pointed star, and in the center, where one would expect to see an eagle or a symbol of national pride, there was only a single, exquisitely detailed human skull. Below the skull, etched in a precise, blocky script, were two words in Latin: Silentium et Finis. Drill Sergeant Thorne stood up, the black metal resting heavily in the palm of his hand. The entire barracks was silent, the other recruits and instructors watching, sensing that something significant and strange was happening. Thorne stared at the metal, a cold dread, a profound and terrifying sense of recognition, creeping up his spine. He was a man steeped in the lore of the special operations world, a world of secrets and shadows, of units that did not officially exist. He had heard the stories, the ghost stories, the myths told in hushed, drunken whispers in the bars outside Fort Bragg, and the safe houses in unnamed countries. The Black Star, the Skull of Silence. It was a supposed marker given to the graduates of a program that wasn't real. A program so secret, so deep in the black, that its very existence was the stuff of nightmares and legends. They called the program the Janissaries, or Group 13. It was a joint CIA and DIA initiative unsanctioned by Congress, run completely off the books. They didn't recruit from the military. They recruited orphans, children of deep cover agents who had been killed in the line of duty, children who had no family, no history, no official existence. They were raised in the shadow world, trained from childhood not as soldiers, but as instruments of national policy, masters of assassination, sabotage, and infiltration. They were ghosts, deployed on one-way missions to solve problems that could not be solved by any other means. The motto, Silentium et Finis, meant silence in the end. It was not a promise of valor. It was a statement of purpose. Thorne felt the weight of the metal, not just its physical heft, but the impossible weight of the truth it represented. He slowly raised his eyes from the forbidden object in his hand and looked at the quiet, unassuming recruit standing before him. He looked at her tired face, her slight frame, and he finally, truly, saw her for the first time. The perfect land navigation wasn't a fluke. It was the result of a childhood spent moving like a ghost through the world's most hostile terrains. The flawless marksmanship wasn't a hidden talent. It was the muscle memory of a life's work. The quiet, unbreakable endurance wasn't weakness. It was the discipline of a soul forged in a fire he couldn't even begin to imagine. He suddenly understood everything. She wasn't struggling with the physical demands of the course because she was weak. She was struggling because the overt, brute force world of the conventional military was a foreign country to her. She was a scalpel being forced to perform the work of a sledgehammer. She wasn't a recruit trying to break into the world of special operations. She was a legend, a ghost, a survivor from a world far deeper and far darker, trying to find her way into the light. This course, this uniform, was her attempt at a normal life, a way to become a soldier instead of the shadow she had been raised to be. The silence in the barracks was absolute. Every eye was on Thorn, on the strange, dark metal in his hand, and on the quiet recruit who stood before him. Thorn was at a crossroads, faced with a choice that was not in any field manual. He held in his hand a secret that the most powerful people in the world would kill to protect. To expose it, to even question her about it, would be to invite a world of trouble he could not comprehend. To punish her for possessing it would be a profound, almost cosmic act of ignorance. He was just a drill sergeant, a gatekeeper to an elite world. But the woman in front of him was from a world that had no gates, only graves. He looked at her one last time, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw not a recruit, but a fellow warrior, a survivor who had seen and done things that would break a dozen of his toughest rangers. He made his decision. Slowly, deliberately, he closed his fingers around the black metal, concealing it from view. He took a half step closer to her, and in a movement so subtle no one else could see it, he discreetly slipped the metal into the BDU pocket on his own trousers. He then took a step back. "Your gear is a mess, Sharma," he said, his voice quiet, all the usual fire and venom completely gone. It was not an accusation, it was a statement. Squared away. It was a dismissal, and it was an act of protection. From that moment on, everything changed. Drill Sergeant Thorn no longer singled out Sharma for harassment. Instead, he watched her with a new, quiet intensity, a look of profound, almost fearful, respect in his eyes. He became her silent guardian. When he saw her struggling on an obstacle, he would offer a quiet, technical correction on her form, not a stream of abuse. When he saw other recruits mocking her, a single, cold glare from him would silence them instantly. The other instructors were baffled by the sudden change in their commander's behavior, but they did not question it. Thorn had seen something in Sharma that they had not, and his judgment was absolute. He made a single, encrypted phone call one night to a man he had once served under, a man who was now a 3-star general at the Pentagon. He didn't use names. He just asked a single, coded question about a ghost story he had once been told. The long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, followed by a quiet, "You did not see anything, Sergeant." Understood, was all the confirmation he needed. He was not just training a recruit. He was shepherding a legend in from the cold. The final day of the selection course arrived. Of the 200 candidates who had started, only 30 remained. Among them, standing tall, her uniform immaculate, was Anya Sharma. She had made it. She had endured. She had proven him, and everyone else, wrong. At the graduation ceremony, Drill Sergeant Thorn stood before the newly minted Rangers, his face an unreadable mask of pride and solemnity. He called each graduate forward to shake their hand and present them with the coveted Ranger tab. When he called Sharma's name, he looked her in the eye, and a silent, profound understanding passed between them. As he shook her hand, he pressed a small, heavy object into her palm. The Black Star. "Welcome to the regiment, Ranger," he said, his voice thick with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. It was respect, absolute and earned. Anya closed her hand around the forbidden metal. Her own secret returned to her. She gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent acknowledgement of the trust he had shown her, of the protection he had given her. She had come to this place seeking a new life, a way into the light. And she had found it, thanks to the one man who had seen her for who she truly was and had chosen to guard her secret, a silent pact between the gatekeeper and the ghost.